Thunder cracked as I stood in a damp tuxedo, my tie crooked from pacing, fists clenched so hard my knuckles had gone white. I had been standing at the edge of the cathedral's side entrance for nearly 40 minutes. The ceremony was supposed to begin at 2. It was almost 3. The guests had all been ushered into limos to wait in comfort. The officiant had already asked me if I was sure I wanted to go through with it, twice. But it wasn't cold feet. It wasn't nerves. It was a single sentence, spoken to me by her father, Robert, in the hallway of that ornate cathedral, 5 minutes before I was supposed to walk out and meet my bride. He leaned in close, lips tight like he was whispering nuclear codes, and said, "Jason's not doing well. Maddie's with him." I stared at him like he had grown another head. "Jason," I said. He nodded solemnly, as though he was confirming a war casualty. "Her ex." He didn't even flinch. "Yes. He's ill. She needed to see him." We all felt. It was right. Ill. That's the word they used. Again and again. Not hospitalized. Not dying. Not anything clear. Just ill. Right before our wedding? I asked. My voice wasn't even angry. It was hollow, like I'd been sucker punched and the pain hadn't reached the nerves yet. "Ethan," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder like a patronizing school principal, "this is bigger than vows. You love her, right? Then give her space. Let her find peace." My mind flipped through all the months leading to that day, the night she cried when I surprised her with her grandmother's ring, the house we picked out together, the wedding playlist she obsessed over for weeks, the fight we had about whether red velvet was too cliché for the cake. And she just left on our wedding day. For him. By then, Cynthia, her mother, had joined us, with that tone-deaf calm she always wore like perfume. "Ethan, honey, this isn't a cancellation. It's a pause. Once Jason recovers, we'll talk through everything. Maddie just needs to close that chapter. With grace." Pause? That word rang in my ears as I sat in the chapel's back room, alone. Her gown was still hanging in the dressing suite, untouched. I looked at it once through the cracked door. Lace and silk, pure white, like it had never seen dirt. I walked out of the cathedral through the side exit and never looked back. No rage. No screams. Just silence. The kind of silence that burns deeper than fury. In the months that followed, I drowned myself in work. Friends reached out, but I ghosted them. My parents were stunned, humiliated in front of their entire church circle, but I never gave them answers. I kept my head down, moved cities, signed a lease on a place with zero memories, and buried myself in building something new. Something no one could cancel. And somehow, I did. By the end of the 3rd year, I had flipped 2 startups, taken control of a failing trading algorithm, and started generating capital faster than I could spend it. I never bought a Lamborghini. I bought silence, homes with acres between them, glass-walled libraries, private cell towers. The more I earned, the more I hid. Because that wedding wasn't just a betrayal, it was a coronation. The day I stopped being who I was supposed to be and became something else entirely. I never looked her up. Not once. Until one morning, 12 years to the day, I stepped out onto the balcony of my Colorado home, coffee in hand, and saw 2 figures on the camera feed. They weren't delivery men. They weren't tourists. It was them, Robert and Cynthia, her parents, standing in the rain, older now, faces pinched and desperate. They weren't ringing the bell. They were yelling at the gate intercom. I didn't even press the button. I just watched. 5 minutes later, they scaled the gate like criminals, tumbled over, and sprinted to the back entrance like they knew the house layout. They weren't there to visit. They were there to take. And they were about to discover just how many ghosts still lived inside that house, including mine. I didn't move from my chair. Just sat there in my study, one hand resting on the polished oak armrest, the other around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. The monitors mounted on the stone wall in front of me flickered with rain-specked footage, front yard, driveway, east garden, and there on the lower right corner, 2 soaked figures creeping along the back terrace like it still belonged to them. Robert's shoulders had caved inward with time. That once imposing, silver-haired patriarch was now a hunched silhouette clutching a broken umbrella like a cane. Cynthia, forever lacquered in makeup and passive aggression, was now shivering under a garbage bag fashioned into a rain hood. Their beige coats looked more like damp napkins than clothing now. But their expressions, that's what caught me. They weren't embarrassed. They looked entitled. They passed the security camera mounted over the back patio, and Cynthia even waved at it, like it was a casual visit. That's when I realized they weren't ashamed to be here. Not at all. They thought they had reason. They thought I owed them. And that made something shift in me. Not anger. Something colder. I pressed the silent lockdown code beneath the desk, and every window in the house hissed as steel shutters began sliding into place. Camouflage panels I'd installed not for safety, but for control. My estate wasn't just a home. It was an ecosystem I built, cell by cell. And they had just walked into it like it was a damn soup kitchen. A soft chime told me the house was sealed. Then came the front door sensor. Unauthorized entry. Back door. Level 1. I watched Robert push open the patio door, which should have been locked. Damn groundskeeper must have overridden autolock for cleaning day. I made a mental note to fire him. But no matter. They were in. And they were already in the wrong room. Because they thought they were walking into the living room. That's how the floor plan used to work. Before I rebuilt the entire wing 4 years ago. Now they were in what I call the maze. A labyrinth of mirrored hallways, featureless doors, and silent, shifting LED lights that guide only those who know where to go. For everyone else, it's a disorienting blur of symmetry and glass. On camera, I watched them pause in confusion. Robert tapped a light switch on the wall. Nothing happened. Cynthia kept saying something I couldn't hear, her lips trembling as she spun in slow circles. She wasn't waving anymore. I stood up and walked toward the antique console beneath the main monitor array. The interface flickered to life as I selected Zone B, Intrusion Theater. The system let me speak through the ceiling speakers if I chose to. But not yet. Let them wander a little more. Let them remember what they did. While they stumbled through the halls, I poured myself a new coffee. Colombian. Hot this time. My dog, Sterling, a retired Belgian Malinois with more discipline than a Marine Corps unit, sat at my feet, eyes sharp, tail still. He knew. He always knew. By the time Robert and Cynthia stumbled into the central chamber, a room designed to mimic a modest study, complete with fake windows, a gas fireplace, and dusty books. They were breathless and damp, eyes darting to every shadow. Cynthia pressed her hand to her chest, like she could feel her own heartbeat betraying her. Robert, meanwhile, was too proud to act scared. He went straight for the liquor cabinet. It was empty. Of course it was. The screen in the room flickered to life behind them. A projector hidden in the ceiling cast an image across the entire bookshelf wall. It was their daughter, Madison, smiling, sitting in my lap, wearing the ring she was supposed to wear 12 years ago. Cynthia screamed. Robert dropped the glass. And that's when I pressed the intercom button, leaned close to the mic, and whispered, "Still feel like I should have waited for Jason?" Their blood drained from their faces in real time. Cynthia staggered back into the leather chair. Robert opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I watched, waited, because this was only the beginning. They hadn't even asked why that video existed. They hadn't even seen the rest of what I built, what she helped me build, what we planned, long after they thought they erased me from her life. And soon, they would understand. You don't cancel a man like me. You create him. Robert was the first to speak, though speak is a generous term. He staggered toward the center of the room, pointing a trembling finger at the wall-sized projection like it was cursed. "What is this?" he croaked. This is fake. That's not her. That's not Maddie." The screen paused at Madison's smirking face. Frozen mid-laugh, head leaned back against my chest, her hand lazily resting on mine, the diamond glinting like a weapon. The very same ring her mother had told me to hold on to until the time was right. The time, according to them, never came. But the world works in circles. And this was about to choke them. Cynthia finally found her voice, and what came out was a choked whimper that tried, pathetically, to morph into authority. "Ethan, what is this? Why are you doing this to us? We came here because we need help. Not this." I watched them through the one-way glass from the adjacent chamber. I could see everything. The twitch of panic behind Robert's eyes, the confused betrayal on Cynthia's lips as her reality started cracking. They hadn't come here with humility. They came here with empty hands and open mouths, expecting to be fed. What they walked into was a reckoning. The intercom stayed silent as I let the video continue. Madison's voice filled the study, playful and confident. "I used to think I owed them something," she said, twirling the ring on her finger. "They raised me, sure. But they also sold me off to Jason like I was some secondhand car. You remember that weekend? When they told me to think about my future?" She leaned forward, looking straight into the camera. "I did. And I realized my future was you. They wanted me to be a daughter who obeyed. But I wanted to be a woman who chose. And I chose you, Ethan." Cynthia let out a dry gasp, and Robert actually backed away from the screen like it was radioactive. They hadn't known. They hadn't known a damn thing. They thought Madison had run back to Jason. Truth was, she did go to Jason that day. Just not to save him. She wanted to watch him fall. Because Madison had found out something weeks before the wedding that changed everything. Something she never told them. Not until years later, long after the wedding was postponed and I had left. Jason wasn't sick. Jason was sickening. He'd been blackmailing her. Photos from college, wild parties, rumors about one of her internships where she'd slipped confidential donor lists to impress him. He'd threatened to release it all unless she came to see him. He told her if she didn't show up, he'd go straight to the press and her parents. And Cynthia? She had political aspirations back then. The mere rumor of scandal would have wrecked her. So they pulled the plug on the wedding. Claimed it was about compassion. All lies. And I believed them. I was the pawn. Disposable. Just the man with the ring. But Madison? She wasn't weak. She wasn't even mad. She was planning. And that visit to Jason? That was when she set him up. Tipped off a corporate investigator I'd quietly hired months earlier, back when I had started to feel the rot in her family's polished smiles. That tip sparked a trail of evidence that would take years to bloom, but bloom it did. Jason went down in a securities fraud bust 2 years later. And Madison? She showed up in my office 4 months after that, out of nowhere. Wearing jeans and a t-shirt, no makeup, no apologies. Just an envelope. Inside, everything her parents never wanted me to see. Letters, receipts, proof, and one photo of her in a hospital room, standing over Jason's bed, holding her phone up with my contact open. She never called. She just let him see it. Let him know who she was thinking of in that moment. I still don't know what he said to her, but I know what she said to me when she handed me that envelope. Let's start over. But this time, let's not invite ghosts. We didn't. We vanished. New names. New places. New plans. The mansion they were standing in now? It was ours. Designed together. Room by room. And we kept our lives hidden for one reason. To make sure that when the ghosts came back, they'd have nowhere left to hide. The screen went black. A soft light flicked on in the ceiling, and the fireplace sparked to life with a low foam. Robert sat down slowly on the edge of the chair like gravity had doubled. His eyes were glass. He looked like a man who had lived a lie for over a decade and was only now starting to realize how deep it went. Cynthia just stared at the floor, shaking her head over and over. And then I spoke again. This time, with no venom. Just clarity. "You thought you were walking into my home," I said. "But you walked into your daughter's judgment." Then came the sound. A soft chime. From above. A new video began to play. And what they saw next would shatter what little pride they still had left. The video that lit up the screen wasn't slick. No intro music, no filters, no edits. Just raw footage. A shaky handheld shot, dated 7 years back. It started in a motel parking lot. Rain coming down sideways. Madison's voice off camera, low and steady. "He's late," she whispered. Then the camera swiveled, capturing Jason stumbling out of a rust-colored Dodge Charger. Thinner now. Hollowed-out face. Limping slightly, his hoodie pulled low like shame could hide him. He didn't notice the camera. He didn't see Madison standing across the lot, half in shadow. "Jason," she called. He froze. And that's when the real truth began bleeding out. Inside the room, Robert stiffened. Cynthia let out a soft, "No." Because they remembered this week. They remembered how Madison took time off to travel alone. Said she needed to heal. Said she was going to visit a retreat. She'd gone to destroy him instead. Jason sat on the edge of the motel bed, knees bouncing, his voice a muttering tangle. "You don't understand what they promised me. Your dad, he told me if I made things messy with Ethan, he'd clear my debt. Help me disappear. I was supposed to scare you off the wedding. Not, Not all this. Madison's voice remained cold, controlled. And you believed him? Jason just laughed bitterly. He wrote the check. The screen froze. In the chamber, Robert went pale. The silence in the room sharpened like a blade. Then the feed cut to a scanned image, bank records. Clear as day. Robert's name. A transfer to Jason's account, exactly 3 days before my wedding was due. Cynthia began shaking her head violently, mumbling something under her breath. No, no, no. Like if she said it fast enough, it would reverse time. But it didn't. Because the next segment was worse. It wasn't Madison's footage. It was mine. Security camera footage, clean, high-res, time-stamped. Robert and Cynthia in my former office. Sitting across from my lawyer. Drinking coffee from my mugs. This was the week after the wedding, when they asked to meet and talk through things. I thought it was a gesture of peace. Instead, it had been strategy. On camera, Robert leaned forward. Ethan's young. Emotional. We don't want him making rash decisions. The real question is, how can we keep the assets frozen until Madison comes to her senses? Madison, who hadn't even returned yet. Cynthia chimed in smoothly. It would be best if Ethan didn't sell anything, just for now. He's impulsive. You saw how he left. This isn't about money. It's about stability. Their voices. Their expressions. Not sadness. Not regret. Cold calculation. I'd forgotten about this footage. Buried it. Archived it in legal folders I never opened again. But Madison must have dug it out later. I realized then she had been building this. Quietly. Meticulously. Every piece of the puzzle had a timestamp. She knew they'd come back. She knew they'd eventually get desperate. The screen went dark again. In the stillness, Robert stood. Not to defend himself, but to pace. His breathing shallow, his hands fisting and unfisting at his sides. He looked like a man who wanted to say something, but every word he had rehearsed for 12 years had just been turned to ash. Cynthia finally found her voice, but it was cracked and hoarse. Where is she? She asked. Where's Madison? I pressed the button on the intercom, letting my voice bleed through the ceiling speakers like thunder through cathedral walls. She's exactly where she wants to be. Far from you. Safe. Untouched by your filth. Cynthia flinched. Her lip quivered, but she didn't cry. She was too proud for that. Instead, she tried the only card she had left. We're still her parents. We did what we thought was best. I stepped into the room. Finally. No longer a voice. No longer a phantom behind the wall. Their heads snapped toward me like a trap just sprung. I wasn't the same man they last saw in a chapel hallway in a rental tux. No more wide eyes, no soft edges. I wore dark wool in silence, and behind me, Sterling padded in, ears up, gaze locked. Robert took a step back. I kept walking, until I stood in the very center of the room and said, clear and sharp, you did what was best for you. You gambled her future to save your pride. You humiliated me to buy time. You paid a junkie to poison her life and didn't flinch. They said nothing. So I kept going. You didn't come here for family. You came because your little empire dried up. The campaign collapsed. The book deals died. And now you're here. In my house. Looking for scraps. I looked straight into Cynthia's eyes. You raised a daughter strong enough to bury you without digging a grave. She looked away. Good. I wasn't finished. You will sit. You will listen. And you will understand. This is not a homecoming. This is the unmasking. Because what came next wasn't evidence. It was witnesses. And I had dozens. The door behind me slid open with a gentle hiss, and in walked a woman in her early 50s. Hair tied in a bun, sharp gray suit, tablet in hand. She looked like the kind of person who ate red tape for breakfast. Mr. Archer, she said, nodding to me. Shall I begin? I nodded once. Cynthia squinted at her. Who are you? Darla Ames. Private investigator. Retained by your daughter over a period of 9 years. She tapped the tablet and cast the contents to the projector. You may want to sit down. They didn't. So she began. Slide 1. A high-resolution image of Cynthia in a cafe. Seated across from a man she clearly didn't recognize until the label beneath the image showed his name. Jacob Farnes. Political consultant. Disbarred. Convicted of laundering campaign funds. That's a lie, Cynthia hissed. Darla ignored her. Image taken 6 weeks before your first official fundraising dinner. Note the envelope. She zoomed in. It was full of cash. Your daughter's money. Madison had been wiring you monthly deposits from her foundation account. You used it to fund your campaign. Through him. Robert finally spoke. You can't just show this and think it's proof. Oh, I don't think it's proof, Darla said, almost smiling. I know it is. Here's the wire trace. The next slide was a forensic breakdown of transfers. Madison's foundation account, an entity she and I built together to fund educational tools for low-income schools, bled slow and steady into shell accounts owned by Cynthia under fake charity names. Over $212,000. Used not to build anything. Not to help anyone. Used to prop up a failed run at city council. She trusted you, I said flatly, turning to Cynthia. She trusted you enough to keep sending the money even after the wedding. She thought you just didn't understand. Turns out, you understood perfectly. You just never gave a damn. Cynthia's hands gripped the edge of the leather chair like she might dig her nails into the wood. Her face had gone blotchy, lipstick bleeding into the cracks around her mouth. Darla turned to the next slide. This one was worse. It was a transcript. A full audio log. Play it, I said. A click. And then Robert's voice. Calm. Calculated. She doesn't need Ethan. That boy's a calculator with legs. You let her marry him, he'll own her. You watch. We need someone pliable. Someone like Jason. The kid's a mess, but he owes me. I can work with that. The silence afterward was suffocating. Date of that recording? Darla asked aloud. 2 weeks before the wedding, I answered. Cynthia opened her mouth to lie. I saw it. The impulse in her eyes. But nothing came out. Because now it was real. Now they were being stripped of every illusion. Not by anger, not by yelling, but by the precision of truth. The kind of truth that turns legs to sand. Darla continued. She unveiled emails next, one sent from Cynthia to Robert about contingency planning in case Madison refuses to comply. She showed timelines that matched mysteriously canceled appointments, anonymous donations to Jason's former rehab center, bribes, and surveillance photos of meetings the two of them denied ever having. Then came the final folder. Now this, Darla said, tone shifting, this was Madison's final request. On the screen appeared a legal document. 2 signatures already filled. Madison's. Mine. It was a full financial severance. It stated, in clear legal language, that Madison permanently renounced all claims of inheritance from either Robert or Cynthia. Any trust, account, estate, or asset linked to them would be legally rerouted. To us, the document said. To the foundation. Robert whispered, she cut us off? Darla didn't blink. She erased you. With precision. I stepped forward again. She gave you 12 years to apologize. 12 years to reach out. But you only came when your pockets turned inside out. You thought the door might still open. Thought there was a key left under the mat. I stared down at them both. You don't knock on a door you tried to burn down. Cynthia broke first. Tears slid down her face, but they looked like the kind that come too late. The kind that sting from losing, not remorse. Robert simply sat down. Not slouched. Not defeated. Just still. Like a man who'd been holding his breath for over a decade and finally couldn't fake air anymore. But I wasn't done. Darla nodded, packed her tablet, and left as silently as she entered. I remained. So here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. They looked up. You're going to eat. I had the kitchen prepare lunch. What? Cynthia blinked, mascara ruined. Lunch. Yes. You're going to eat. Because once the door seals again, it won't open until I'm done showing you what you buried, what you created. And I want your stomachs full for the next part. Robert didn't ask what that meant. Because somewhere in the back of his ruined, greedy mind, he already knew. The house wasn't a mansion. It was a mirror. And they were just beginning to see their reflections. The dining room they were led to was not the grand, chandeliered hall they were expecting. No gold trim, no portraits, no fake civility. Just a long obsidian table surrounded by high-backed black leather chairs, the walls matte and quiet like a confession booth. A silent server, one of my staff, ex-military, unshakable, escorted them in. Plates were already set. Grilled salmon, root vegetables, filtered water. Nothing indulgent. Nothing fancy. Just enough to remove any excuse for interruption. They sat without speaking. Robert picked at his fork, eyes darting between the security cameras tucked into the corners of the ceiling like they might attack. Cynthia pushed her vegetables around the plate but didn't touch a bite. I stood behind the mirrored panel in the control room adjacent, watching through the one-way glass. The room was soundproofed, sealed. Every inch of this wing was. Sterling sat beside me. His ears were down, calm, but alert. They had no idea how far down this rabbit hole went. After 15 minutes, the lights dimmed, and a new projector lowered from the ceiling above the table. Cynthia flinched. Robert looked up like a dog waiting for thunder. The screen lit up. This time, it wasn't images. It was video. Jason again. But older. Worn. It was an interview. One Madison recorded secretly just a year before his death. He sat in a rehab chair, hands twitching, voice broken by cigarettes and bitterness. "I wasn't supposed to fall in love with her again," he muttered. "I was just supposed to cause a scene. Get in Ethan's head. Shake him." He let out a wet laugh. "But you see someone like Madison walk into your life again, and it's like, you think maybe she's the only thing left that ain't rotten." Cynthia stared at the screen like it was a ghost. Jason leaned forward, coughing. "They told me to do it. Robert. Said Ethan was too sharp, too ambitious. Said Madison needed someone who'd stay in the lines, not draw new ones." He coughed again. "And the money? Hell, that was the easiest part. I just had to pretend to be pathetic. I was. That made it easy." He glanced off camera. "Truth is, I think Ethan could have saved all of us. If we weren't such greedy sons of bitches." The video ended. No music. No fade to black. Just darkness. In the dining room, Robert slowly put his fork down. For the first time since they arrived, he looked wrecked. The kind of wreck that doesn't scream. It just quiets. Cynthia's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this to us?" I stepped into the room. Not from a door, from the wall. A seamless panel slid aside, and I walked through, Sterling beside me like a shadow. She gasped. "Robert didn't even look?" I walked to the end of the table, my footsteps echoing in the silence. "Because you never stopped pretending." I stood behind my chair, didn't sit. Just looked at them like they were artifacts. Fossils of people who once were human masks. "You didn't come here to apologize. You came to negotiate. That's what makes this worth it." I slid a small object onto the table. A flash drive. Cynthia looked at it like it was ticking. "What's that?" Robert croaked. "The full archive," I said. "Emails. Voice memos. Internal memos from Jason's fake rehab center. Photos of every meeting, every transaction, every time you told someone I wasn't stable enough for your daughter. You used influence. Money. Lies. All of it. Here." I leaned closer. "And I'm not going to leak it. I'm going to hand it to you." That finally got a reaction. They both looked up at me in stunned confusion. "You're giving it to us?" Cynthia asked. "Yes. So you can feel what it's like to hold your own execution in your hands. Because from this point forward, every time you open your mouth in public, every time you try to play the noble parent card, you'll have to wonder if I'm watching. If I'll press send." I smiled then. Not with warmth. With precision. "I want you to live the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Robert opened his mouth. Closed it. "Good." I wasn't done. "Do you know what Madison said to me after you canceled the wedding?" I asked, standing straighter. They didn't answer. She said, "They think they spared me from a mistake, but they made me into a weapon." I tapped the drive. "This is what that weapon built." Then I stepped back from the table. "The next room is yours. Guest suite. Clean clothes. Towels. You'll sleep here tonight. You don't get to walk out until tomorrow morning. And when you do, you won't take the drive. You'll leave it behind." Cynthia's face was a war zone, mascara rivers, dry cheeks, a jaw barely holding its shape. Robert just sat, silent. I turned to go. But at the doorway, I paused. "Breakfast is at 7. The next guest arrives at 8. Cynthia blinked, confused. "Next guest," she whispered. I met her eyes and said with finality, "Your granddaughter." Then I left, and behind me silence, except for Sterling's soft footsteps, and the quiet gasp of a woman who had just remembered the one person she hadn't thought about in 12 years. The air in the guest suite was thick, not with warmth, not with comfort, just waiting. The kind of stillness you feel before a storm kicks the doors in. Cynthia didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed all night, her hands twisted in the hotel-grade sheets like they could anchor her to the past. But there was no past left. Not the one she'd fabricated. Not the one she'd held up with wine-soaked speeches and faux humility at fundraisers. Robert lay stiff on the other bed, arms crossed like he was still trying to negotiate with gravity itself. They didn't speak, not even when the sun breached the blinds and sliced the room open with light. At 6:55, the suite door unlocked with a mechanical click. Not opened, just unlocked. A signal. At exactly 7 o'clock, the dining room came alive again. Fresh coffee, scrambled eggs, toast, jam. Simple, deliberate. They sat. They ate. Not because they wanted to, but because they needed to be strong for who was coming next. The moment I mentioned her, I knew their entire understanding of what was happening had shifted. Up until then, this was humiliation. Justice, maybe. A reckoning. But now it was legacy. Now it was blood. At 7:59, the front gate pinged. She arrived in a gray coat, boots splattered with melting snow, hair braided down her back, no makeup, no ceremony. She looked exactly like Madison did the first day I met her. Fierce without knowing it, calm without effort. She was 17. Her name was Isla, our daughter, the one they had never seen, never asked to see. Not once. I met her at the door. You ready? I asked. She nodded once. Yeah, I've been ready since the day you told me who they were. I smiled, not as a father, but as a man watching justice put on her boots. We walked together down the long hall, Sterling trailing behind us like a sentinel. When we entered the dining room, Robert was mid-sip. Cynthia froze, her eyes wide, lips parting slowly. Isla stopped across the table. She didn't sit. She just looked at them like they were fossils. Cynthia stood up, too fast, her chair skidding behind her. Isla, she breathed. Oh my God. Look at you. You're beautiful. Isla didn't respond. She turned to me. Can I? She asked, gesturing at the stack of folders I'd set beside her plate. I nodded. She opened the first one. Inside were photos. Drawings, really. Crayon. Marker. Some pencil. Pages with childish handwriting scrawled across them. Robert squinted. What is this? Letters, Isla said flatly. All the letters I wrote between ages 5 and 10. The ones Mom helped me mail to you. Birthday cards. Christmas. Easter. The one I sent when I lost my first tooth. She pulled another paper from the folder. This one had glitter. Mom made me clean it up afterward. Cynthia's mouth quivered. I never got. Isla cut her off. You did. We tracked the mail. My mom paid for tracking numbers on every envelope. We have the logs. And you know what? Every single one was marked as delivered. Cynthia sat back down like her legs stopped working. Isla continued, voice sharper now. You didn't call. You didn't write back. You didn't even try. You just erased me. Like I was part of the same mistake you blamed her for. Robert stayed silent. He knew. He always knew. Isla reached for the second folder. This one was newer. Legal documents. One after another. Power of attorney. Trust agreements. Private school admissions. Travel waivers. She tapped the final page. This is the adoption reversal. The legal declaration that I'm no longer bound by any assumed guardianship connected to your family. Not that you ever acted like grandparents. But this makes it official. Cynthia let out a noise, half sob, half protest. You don't understand, she whispered. We were ashamed. We thought. Madison didn't want us to. She didn't want you poisoning me, Isla snapped. That's different. But you could have tried. You didn't. Robert finally leaned forward. I was protecting our family's name. Isla turned to him slowly. You failed. It was like a trial, but no one needed a judge. No gavel. Just truth. Cold and sharp, like a scalpel in the hands of someone who knows exactly where to cut. She pulled out one final item. A photo. Of Madison and me. Taken just 2 weeks ago. Smiling. At peace. On a hill in Montana where we'd bought land. Where we'd decided to build our next home. Not a mansion. Not a fortress. Just a house. For us. And Isla. Isla placed the photo gently on the table and whispered. She said she forgave you. But she also said forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That part. She gave to me. She stood tall. This is me not forgetting. Then, without waiting for permission, Isla walked to the center of the room, picked up the flash drive, the one from the night before. and dropped it into the fireproof safe built into the wall. She turned the key, locked it, then turned to them both. "You won't ever see me again. And if I see you near any of us, there won't be cameras. There won't be folders. Just consequences." She walked out without another word. Cynthia sobbed. Robert stared at the locked safe like it held his coffin. I followed my daughter out, the door closing behind us with a soft, final click. And the past stayed sealed behind that sound. The gate closed behind Isla with the soft hydraulic sigh of finality, sealing the long driveway like a tomb. She didn't cry, didn't ask for comfort. She just walked to the waiting car, slid into the back seat, and disappeared into the tree-lined road, a silhouette of calm vengeance in a world full of noise. I stayed behind in the foyer, watching the camera feed as the black sedan vanished. Only then did I exhale. Not from relief, but from the weight of completion. 12 years of silence, of hiding, of building a life behind mirrored walls, and now it was shifting. And inside those walls, 2 ruins still remained. Robert and Cynthia hadn't left the dining room. They hadn't spoken. They hadn't moved. So I gave them time. 3 more hours. Just long enough to sit in the aftermath of everything they never thought would catch up with them. At noon, I sent one of my security staff to deliver a set of papers and a key fob. A letter sat atop the stack, my handwriting sharp and deliberate. "You'll find that your bank accounts are untouched. I didn't bleed you out. Not my style. But I did freeze your lines of credit temporarily. Consider it a simulation of the panic you almost caused Madison when she discovered her own trust was being siphoned to fund your schemes. The foundation will remain active. You are not named in any of its records. No credit, no board seats, no memorial plaques. Your legacy ends here, quietly." The key fob unlocks the side gate. The driver will take you back to your hotel. Your return flight has been rebooked. First class. Because unlike you, I don't humiliate people in public. I do it with privacy, dignity, and a perfect memory. You will never be contacted by me or Madison again. Nur Isla. This chapter is closed. Burn the pages if you want. The ink has already dried. I watched through the one-way panel as they read it. Cynthia's hands trembled, but she didn't cry this time. She looked too hollow for tears. Robert just placed the letter back down and folded his hands in his lap. Not defiant. Not defeated. Just empty. A man who had shaped his entire life around controlling others now sat in a room where every ounce of control had been stripped from his bones, piece by piece, in slow, surgical incisions. That's when I entered. One last time. Sterling didn't come with me. He didn't need to. They weren't threats anymore. They were shadows waiting for the lights to be turned off. Robert looked up when I stepped in. Cynthia didn't. I stood across the table. "You know what still shocks me?" I asked calmly. "You had everything. A daughter who was brilliant, devoted, willing to overlook betrayal just to keep the peace. A second chance 3, 4, 5 times over. And still you chose control over connection." No answer. So I leaned in, placing one last file on the table. A photograph slipped free. It was old. Taken during our engagement, before the wedding that never happened. The 3 of us, laughing. Me. Madison. Her parents. Smiles all around. The kind of smile you plaster on when cameras come out. Except now, under blacklight, you could see what it really was. Performance. A family that never had love, only choreography. "You could have had the real thing," I said quietly. "You were standing in the middle of it. But you were too obsessed with the spotlight to see what was growing behind the curtain." Robert finally spoke. A whisper. "What do we do now?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "You go home. You live with it. And maybe, if you're lucky, you learn from it." I turned to Cynthia. "Though I doubt you will." Her mouth twitched. But no defense came. Not anymore. At the door, I paused again. Because there was one more truth left. "You know, when Madison asked me if she should tell Isla about everything, I said no." They looked up, startled. But Madison said something I'll never forget. She said, "How will our daughter know how to spot a manipulator unless she sees the ones that made me?" I smiled, not out of malice. Out of finality. "So thank you. You taught her better than you ever intended." And I walked away. This time for good. The plane lifted off from Denver International just after 5 that evening. I watched it go from my office, the tail barely a dot against the golden sky as it climbed, carrying Robert and Cynthia back to whatever sterile corner of the country still tolerated their presence. I didn't track where they went. I didn't care. They were gone. But something strange happened the moment that plane disappeared beyond the clouds. The house went still. Not quiet still. Like every room exhaled. Like every hallway stopped waiting. Like the weight of 12 long years finally slid off the beams, the floorboards, the air itself. I stood at the edge of the central hall and let my fingers brush the frame of the door where I first stood the day we bought the land. Madison had traced this space with a pencil months before construction even began, whispering dreams while the blueprint still lived on paper. She said we'd need long halls to walk when we were mad at each other, and high windows to let the mountains in when we didn't have the words. She didn't know, back then, how those windows would frame the fall of her past. I walked into the library next, our sanctuary. Still smelled faintly of cedar and paper and something warmer. The desk lamp glowed like a heartbeat. A sealed envelope sat on the center of the desk. No stamp. No label. Just one word in her handwriting. Now. I sat down slowly, heart kicking harder than it had the entire week. I had no idea when she left it there. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet. Her handwriting. Ethan. I knew you'd build something unbreakable. I also knew they'd try to crawl back in. That's why I gave them time. To try. To reach. To knock. I gave you this house, this plan, this daughter, because I wanted to see what we could grow once the rot was gone. And you did it. You cut the infection out. With precision. With patience. Without losing your soul. Most men who get hurt try to become knives. You build a home instead. Thank you for raising Isla with silence when she needed peace, and with fire when she needed truth. I love you. I'm proud of you. And now, it's our time. I sat there for a long time. I don't remember when I started crying. Not loud. Not heavy. Just slow. The way trees leak sap when wounded. That letter broke something open in me I didn't know was still locked. Because I'd been so busy defending us, I forgot what it meant to be done. But now I was. The ghosts had been summoned. Confronted. Named. They were never going to walk these halls again. And the people who mattered, we could finally walk forward without stepping over landmines. At dusk, I walked outside. The mountain air had that knife-sharp edge of early spring. Cold, clean. Isla was already in the backyard, flannel shirt, headphones in, lying on a deck chair with a sketch pad in her lap. She saw me, smiled, lifted her pencil in a lazy salute. God, she looked like her mother. Inside, I heard Madison's laughter echo faintly from the kitchen on the phone, probably. She was telling someone that yes, the meeting in Montana was still happening, and no, she didn't regret lighting the match. Good, because the fire was righteous. Later that night, I stood at the massive fireplace in the great room. In my hand was a small box. Mahogany. Clean edges. Heavy with memory. Inside, every photo from the rehearsal dinner. Every receipt from the canceled venue. The original guest list. A dried flower from Madison's bouquet that never made it down the aisle. And one thing more. A USB drive. The only backup of the footage, the files, the interviews. I tossed it all into the flames. Watched it blacken, curl, twist into smoke. Some things shouldn't be archived. Some victories don't need trophies. Only space. To breathe. To live. To build the next chapter. And for the first time since the day I stood in that cathedral alone, hands trembling in a tuxedo that felt 2 sizes too tight, I was free. 1 month later, the house was louder than usual. Not with conflict, but with life. Isla had just been accepted into her first-choice university, full scholarship, top of her class, dual majoring in architecture and urban sociology. She said she wanted to build things that outlast lies. That line hit harder than she knew. Madison nearly cried when she read the letter, and I pretended my eyes were red from allergies. No one bought it. Madison had returned to her foundation full-time. After 12 years of operating in the shadows, she was finally stepping forward, press interviews, speaking engagements, full transparency. The public didn't need to know the story behind it all. Just the result, a woman who rebuilt herself from ash and helped others do the same. And me? I slept. I slept, for the first time in years, without waking at 3 in the morning wondering what file I forgot to encrypt or what memory might claw its way back into the present. There were no more ghosts. They'd all been shown the door. But something strange happened 2 weeks after we burned the box. I received a letter. Mailed. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the penmanship. It was from Robert. Just 3 sentences. I've watched the footage every day since. You were right. I only regret learning too late how small a man I really was. No signature. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because the point wasn't to continue the conversation. The point was that the silence, my silence, finally had weight. A weight they would feel for the rest of their lives. Every day without Isla. Every birthday missed. Every headline that carried Madison's name without mention of where she came from. Every time their phone lit up with no call from us. That was the real reckoning. Not drama. Not exposure. Just absence. Complete, deliberate, permanent absence. They tried to cancel my wedding to protect their pride. I canceled their entire legacy to protect something far more sacred. My family. Last Sunday, we stood together, Madison, Isla, and I, at the edge of our new property in Montana. Fresh snow on the trees. Groundbreaking next month. A house Madison designed herself. Open floor plan. Wide windows. No secrets. As we stood there, Isla nudged my side. So, she said, grinning, are you going to build another secret room in this one? I smirked. Nah. No secrets left to keep. She nodded, satisfied. Madison leaned into my arm. The past was behind us, but the foundation beneath our feet? Unshakable. And that, more than anything, was what they could never steal again.